Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. I have a literary agent interview for you today with Joseph Perry of Perry Literary Agency, and he's going to answer all my query questions and tell us about himself and the services that he provides for authors. I think you guys are going to really love the information that he provides, and I hope that it helps you get to know him better, and for those who might want to query him, gives you a little bit more information. My favorite book of this week is one I'm actually not even done with yet, which is always a good sign, right? The book is called Her Sister's Child by Allison James, and it comes out on November 26th, so just here in a few days. The first chapter of it is terrifying as a parent. You know, a woman wakes up and finds her baby's gone. So terrible. It's really well done. It's got a couple different points of view, and I am just sucked in, and I can't put it down. So let me go ahead and read you the blurb. She rolls over and reaches for her instinctively, her baby. Her hand hits air and flaps redundantly. She stumbles out of bed and switches on the light, but this only confirms it. The baby is gone. Someone has taken her. I know, it's so sad. 16 years ago, Lizzie Armitage, I could be pronouncing it wrong, woke to find her newborn baby gone. Just days later, Lizzie was dead. Her sister Paula swore she would do everything she could to find the child. If she hadn't promised to keep Lizzie's pregnancy a secret, maybe the baby wouldn't have disappeared, and maybe Lizzie would still be alive. But in nearly a decade, Paula's never found any trace until now. When Paula bumps into an old friend from the past, she realizes she wasn't the only one who knew about her sister's child. Someone knows what happened that day. Someone knows where Lizzie's baby went. But can Paula find out the truth before another family is ripped apart? It's really good. It's very well-paced. It's thrilling. The points of view are really well done and distinct, so I definitely recommend Her Sister's Child by Allison James, which is out next week. Now, let's go ahead and get to know Joseph. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do to publishing and becoming a literary agent?
So it's a great question and really personal to me, because that's actually how I met my wife. So I attended the NYU summer publishing course in 2010, and maybe I was just a naive 22-year-old. But when I walked in there, I didn't realize how many females are in the industry compared to males. So I always joke around with everybody that I felt like I was on The Bachelor. And, long story short, we ended up, dating, getting married. And, here we are 5 years, later into a very happy marriage. And we just welcomed our first child, Alex, in December. So on a personal level, that's really how when I think of publishing, it really brings a smile to my face. And professionally, and how I wanted to get into being a literary agent was through that same course. And anybody who's been a participant in that course knows it's divided into magazines and books, and people from different parts of the industries come in and give talks to the students. And I had heard a panel, two separate panels, one on literary agents and one on lawyers, on intellectual property law. And up until that point, of course, like every other English major, I wanted to be an editor. But after I heard those panels, I thought, oh, wow, that sounds really interesting, where I could sort of combine the creative editorial side, but also get to know the business side, which inevitably I would, no matter the position, but I feel like that's sort of like a fast track to get to really know the business, via negotiating contracts and drafting contracts.
Well, awesome. I mean, that is such a wonderful, warm memory that you must have of meeting your wife in that course, and have so many positive memories about it all, which I love. And, I think that's interesting that you had this idea that you were going to be an editor, and you take this course and you took a different direction, right? Because you ended up going to law school, and now you're also a literary agent, but you run your own law firm for that delves into the publishing world, right?
Yes. So I have my own agency. It's Perry Literary, and my own law firm, formerly called the Law Offices of Joseph J. Perry. And I primarily practice in publishing law. I worked in the music industry after law. I actually worked in Sony Music for a little time after law school, but publishing was always what I wanted to do. So I help authors negotiate their contracts, any type of copyright issues, trademark issues, pre-publication review, that sort of thing. And it's really my passion, and I love being able to help authors, and whether it's through my agency or through my firm, educating them on the business side and the legal side. I know that they're very appreciative of it, because when you're writing, that's what you really focus on. You're focused on your craft. You should be. But I think when they get sort of an education in the nuances of different types of royalties and whatever it may be, it's really gratifying for me. So this is I'm one of those lucky people who is really getting to do what they love on a daily basis. I don't find this to be work. I'm excited to wake up every day and get to work.
Oh, that's the best. That's what we all want with our job, right?
Yes, exactly.
I think that's so awesome, and I love that you have this passion and have started to offer these things to authors, because I think you're right. I mean, authors are focused on writing. Like when you go into a querying process and finding an agent, I mean, the first thing on your mind isn't, okay, what's my contract going to look like, and what's the royalties going to be, and how am I going to understand all the legal jargon and all of that. So I mean, it's helpful that you have done all the work to understand all of that, and then can help authors out. And I'm sure too that affects you as a literary agent, where you could maybe not give them legal advice, like if they weren't your legal client, but you could help them maybe understand a little bit of what's going on in the contract.
Exactly. And any little thing that I could give them in terms of whether it's just understanding what certain rights are, how certain royalties, why the percentages are the way they are, and how they, why they're different. Basically, in a nutshell, understanding the different business models of the various publishers, and it helps to educate them, because maybe they'll want to go on a self-published route or a hybrid route, or maybe they want to go the Big Five or the academic route, whatever it may be. No matter what their book is that I'm their book contract is that I'm negotiating, I really try to delve into the various nuances of that particular part of the industry to show them the differences, that if you were to do this for your next book, here's what you might expect. I try my best to give them just a general education.
Yeah, that's so helpful, because there's so much that is out there that I'm sure that we can all get confused by. It's helpful to have somebody to just help decode it a little bit.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. Joe, tell me a little bit about when your love for books began.
Oh, I think like everyone else as a very, very young child, I have very vivid memories of reading. Actually, because it makes sense why one of my big genres is sports. I remember reading the Matt Christopher books all the time as a kid. And outside of sports, I remember having a really big affinity for the Boxcar Children, for the Clue series. But I've always been such a huge sports junkie that I love those types of books. And it's, it just followed me all the way through high school and college and to law school. So that love of sports books hasn't really changed. But my appreciation for other books outside of sports really has, because just as a quick aside, when I was about to enter college, I found that I was musically inclined. I taught myself a few instruments, and before that, I was actually an accounting major when I went into college. Wow. And by my sophomore year, I was an English major, and that's solely because I started playing music and started reading the books that my favorite bands and musicians, were influenced by. And one thing led to another, and I thought, wow, like I've been missing so much. I've been so focused on getting that, and of course I'm a lawyer. A lawyer and accountant's a very conventional career, but I feel I've taken that creative side that I didn't know about myself and sort of turned it into a profession.
Well, that's awesome. Your love for sports books eventually led you down this path.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, Joe, let's get a little bit into some query questions, because I know the people who listen to this and the literary agent interviews love this. And obviously, your opinion is subjective to you, but the people who might be wanting to query you will be really interested to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
So my first question, I'd love to know if you think that queries need to stick to the specified formula. Now, that's not your agency's submission guidelines, because those should be followed, right? But this is, like the basic formula of a query that you read on every blog, or if you Google, it tells you, how to write a query, and having it be that way instead of trying something gimmicky.
Mm-hmm. So for me, because I primarily work with nonfiction, it does help me, especially when I have like a flurry of submissions. So I can go immediately to this, spot in the query that tells me a little bit about, yourself, because that's really what I'm looking for in terms of nonfiction. Of course, I'm looking to see if you can write, but, mainly I'm looking at your platform. Mm-hmm. So that really does help, especially when I'm busy. Sometimes gimmicky stuff, at least it'll get my attention, but at least I haven't gone with any clients or any prospective clients who have done things like that. I've just made them just more traditionally minded, but especially when I'm busy, it really helps to know, really where in the query I need to go to get the information that I need.
I mean, I think that might be the main purpose for why your query should be a certain way, because as agents, you guys just get a ridiculous amount, right? And I think that the idea behind some people doing something gimmicky is they're like, oh, this will break up the monotony and it'll stand out. But I think it could also I think it backfires and kind of makes you more confused when you, like you said, you're used to knowing where to look for the information that you need in the query, and if you try and find that and it's not there, I bet it's a little bit like, okay, what's going on? And you have so many queries to look at. I feel like that could just make you more apt to pass on it and just be like, okay, move on to the next one, because this is too confusing for me.
Exactly. If I have to search through to see the information that I need, or do a quick Google search, just takes some precious time away. Not that my time is incredibly precious, but it above anybody else's, but it definitely does. It really does help.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. My next question, I'd love to know what your number one query no-no is.
My number one query no-no, I would say, humorously, getting my name right. For whatever reason, I've had a number of queries that have started with Dear Jerry, for Jerry Perry, I guess. I don't know why
Jerry Perry.
Jerry. So I would say getting my name right, first and foremost. The other thing that I would say is not trying to sort of tout your it's really just because of humorous query letters that I've received. For instance, stating like, oh, if you represent me, we're going to win the Nobel Prize, or we're going to win the Pulitzer Prize. I've received so many of those, so it's just like, you're immediately just going to say no to those.
Yeah. No.
It really just goes in line with your last question that, if you just keep it, at least for me, keep it exactly how, you've seen it in, whether websites or books that you've read, just keep it to the certain format, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, and make an effort to spell your name right. I mean, I think
exactly.
I mean, it seems like such a small thing, but it's so big because it kind of makes you wonder, like, oh, are they just like mass emailing people and they don't really care about if they're really querying me? It's a small detail, but I feel like it can say a lot.
Exactly, and along the same lines, I have received numerous queries where you could see all the other agents on it, and it's not to say that I understand that you're you're writing one email, it gets to a lot of different people. Maybe you can get your answer, faster that way. But, you do like to think that that person is querying you for a reason, that they saw something about you as an agent, whether it's your certain genre or your certain style, or really what you bring to the table. So, I think, if you could, make it, individualized. I would say it's sort of like, applying for a job in a sense.
Yes.
In that, you want to make it, you want to have that personal touch.
You definitely do. I think that definitely helps. My next question, I'd love to know what things in first pages will make you stop reading.
The writing.
Right.
To be blunt, there are a lot of grammatical errors that will make me, stop immediately. Beyond that, I'd really try to give a lot of queries a chance. And on that note too, I would say, just as someone who does this by himself, I don't have an assistant or anything. It's just me. I would say for authors to be patient. I know that's the hardest thing to hear in the world, because as agents, we're very impatient as well. We want to hear from editors, but it really is the truth. We can only get through so much. So, at one time, especially if we're doing it by ourselves. So I would say just to be patient, and if we are interested, we will reach out to you.
And that is definitely, I feel like, for me, the hardest part of the process. I'm the most impatient person in the world, Joe. So, I mean, that's the last thing that I want to hear for sure. But publishing is such a slow industry in lots of different ways. We got to get used to it.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
My next query question, I'd love to know your favorite thing to see in a query, and besides maybe like really great writing.
Right. For me, just because it's nonfiction platform, it makes it so much easier to sell the book. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish it could be that the writing was fantastic and the publisher will recognize that and they'll want to publish it, 1 million copies of your book. But unfortunately, the way that the industry has been changing, and especially now it's going on with COVID, and bottom lines are shrinking, platforms are more important than ever.
Yeah.
And that's they want to know that they're going to be able to profit from your book, and so that's really what I look for. And it doesn't have to be a huge platform. You don't have to be a huge Pulitzer Prize, New York Times best-selling author. That'd be fantastic, but it's not the be-all end all. But platform does help. Twitter helps, Instagram helps, anything that you can do to build it, because it makes it so much easier to tell. Because at the end of the day, they may love your book, but if the sales team, marketing and publicity, if they can't envision it either in the stores, or if they can't envision a lot of copies being sold, they're gonna pass on it, even if the writing is fantastic.
Right. And if you have a platform of however many people, it doesn't have to be astronomical, I imagine, but you have like a set of people you could go to and say, hey, here's my book, buy it. That's very helpful. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more audience you build, the better.
Yes. Well, wonderful. Mm-hmm. Thank you. My last query question, I'd love to know if you have any tips or golden rules for the authors out there who are querying right now.
So I would say treat the querying stage, and really at all stages, treat it like a job, treat it like a business, and that's primarily what this is. Yes, you're trying to get your book out there, and yes, we want to all love the creativity and the wonderful genius of your writing, but at the end of the day, that's really what you're going into. You have to understand the highs and lows of this, and I think the one real thing that I would say is just be prepared to hear no a lot of times, especially for first-time authors.
Oh yeah.
And it has nothing to do with, or it may have nothing to do with the fact that your writing isn't good. It may just be that for that certain time that publisher isn't publishing your type of book, or your platform at any given time isn't big enough. So I would just say, be prepared to hear that, and it really helps you to develop some thick skin. But I would say treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. If you want to be take it serious as a writer, and not to say that people aren't, of course they do.
I love your point about treating it like a business. I think that a lot of authors go into the query stage maybe not really truly understanding that it is a business professional relationship. I think they do in some aspects, but I think they don't realize how much it changes and how important it is to be professional, but also to understand that when you hear no and when you don't get responses from queries, it's not because agents are like, oh, I'm going to crush this person's dreams today. I'm going to send them a form rejection or not even respond at all. But because you have to look at it as if it's going to sell, if it's, the right place in the market, if all these other things. And I think as an author, that can be a hard thing to wrap your head around, especially when you've poured so much into a book. But I think that is a great tip and a really good thing to remember.
Yeah, and it's really like I was saying before about treating it like a job, and like any other job, it's all about timing, right? If that certain company has needs for that position, and you at that right place at the right time, you're gonna you'll be given the job. And it's sort of the same thing here. All of the things have to come together, from the editor to marketing to sales to publicity to everybody agreeing that yes, this book can get published.
Yeah.
And I think it's really more so that this is really more for first time authors. I think the ones who are seasoned vets, they've been through it all. But the ones who are just getting into this or thinking about getting into it, that's what you have to realize. And what is frustrating is that it's out of your control.
Yes.
You can only do so much. You've created the manuscript, but beyond that, it's out of your control. So it's not to say that you can't, you won't hear yes. And really, at the end of the day, all you do need is one, right?
Yeah.
It is like finding a job.
Yeah.
But if they do say no, that doesn't mean that your book isn't worthy. It's just about trying to find that right publisher and having everything come together.
Yeah, and that's like the hardest part. Like you said earlier, it's out of our control. And that can feel so daunting in the process. You're like, okay, well, I guess I'll just put this good feeling out there and see what happens.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing that. My next question, so you've read your author's manuscript, you love the book, you want to talk to them, you're on that call with them. What else are you looking for in an author when you're chatting with them?
Outside platform and writing, I'm really looking to see really how they are as a person, and can we work together like any other relationship. You want to make sure that you'll get along, that he or she will be receptive to any potential feedback or comments, because at the very beginning stage, after we sign our contract, I get right into editing the proposal, and we may go back and forth 5 or 10 rounds, depending on how good it is. Sometimes it's ready to go, and there's only 1 or 2 of them. But I need authors who understand that this is a collaborative process, because my job, yes, it's to negotiate your contract, yes, it's to draft it, and to get you the most rights possible and have the contract be in your favor. But at the end of the day, it's also putting the best product forward. And if you're not receptive to criticism or how we can potentially make it better, then it may not work. And that also goes towards the editorial phase too. Once my job is over, so to speak, and you're with the publisher, I just think you have to get used to having other people try to shape your manuscript. And it's been easier for some people I've dealt with, and it's also been tougher. But at the end of the day, it makes for a better product, because that's really what you're trying to do. That's how you're going to get the attention of the publisher.
Definitely. And I think it's good to remember on that note, as an author, that the agent and your agent and your editor aren't trying to destroy your book or tell you it's awful. They're clearly as passionate about it as you are, because they're working with you, so to not take it as like, oh, they're trying to rip it apart, but they're really just trying to make it better. And I think that can be a hard thing as an author. I mean, I've experienced that. Somebody's given me feedback and I'm like, no, I don't want to change it. Like, that's my favorite part.
Exactly.
But yeah, you have to understand, like, they are coming at it from a mindset of, oh, what can we absolutely do to make it the best it can be?
Exactly. I think that's such a great point. That's really what we're trying to do. We see something in this. If we didn't, we wouldn't have tried to sign you as a client. So I think if you're coming at it from that lens, that all we're both trying to do is make it as best as it can be.
Yeah, that's a number one thing to remember as you go into edits.
And I know it's much it's easier said than done.
For sure. I have definitely gotten feedback, and even though I know that and I can say it as advice, right, I've like hid from my computer for a week, like, oh, I can't even look at that feedback. It's just breaking my heart. Joe, I'd love for you next to share with me what you are looking for right now. What is on your manuscript wish list?
So I am looking, I'm always looking for sports, of course, pop culture. I primarily specialize in sports and pop culture, of course, because I'm a lawyer, politics, law, history, anything with like a deep dive into journalism, whatever the subject may be. That's primarily what I'm looking for. I have dabbled in fiction, but I'm finding, and maybe it's just personal preference, that I enjoy working with nonfiction, just because I just love learning about all different types of things. So that's probably why I prefer that.
Well, wonderful. I hope that there are some people listening who have exactly what you're looking for, and you will see it in your inbox soon. I have one last question, and I have been told it is a pretty hard question, so I apologize, but I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. This isn't your favorite book of all time, because that's a question no one can answer, but just a book you've read recently that you really loved.
That is a very hard question, and I actually saw this thing on social media. It was a meme that had said, I forget, the setup to the joke, but it is, I've read, the first 50 pages of 75 books during the pandemic, and I feel that's sort of where I've been. So I've recently read, I'm almost finished with, it's called The Great Dissent, about Justice Holmes, and it's like my lawyer, my inner lawyer here nerding out about about the First Amendment. So I imagine if you had been to the law, or the inner workings of Supreme Court decisions in 1918, I imagine you may not like that. In terms of sports, I'm reading. It's called Boomtown, about Oklahoma City, and how that town has sort of embraced its basketball team, and it's fantastic. Talking about the history of the city, which I admittedly don't know much about. And then in terms of music, the one that I did finish. It's called 1965, so I'm a huge 60s music fan. It's basically the chronology of the year and everything that was released in that year, and from Bob Dylan to the Beatles to the Stones to Motown. It's just my favorite. Actually, it's my personal favorite year of music. So I love various books like that. So
well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. I don't get a lot of nonfiction shared sometimes, like very rarely. So that's awesome. I love that. I definitely don't read enough nonfiction, but my fiction to be read pile is just overwhelming. So that's probably why. Joe, thank you so much for chatting with me and letting me and my listeners get to know you as a literary agent and a lawyer, and just getting to pick your brain a little bit.
It was a blast talking to you about the agenting world and publishing, and I hope to be back on soon.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. If you could please rate and review this wherever you have found it, that would be amazing and make my day. I love reading the reviews for this podcast. If you can't review it wherever you are listening, please make sure to post about it. Post something on Twitter, post something on Instagram, and tag me at Rose Quinny, QUINNY. That makes my day as well. But alrighty guys, see you next time.